Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Escaping Your Government-Assigned Schools. My name is Jenny Gentles. I'm the director of the Education Freedom Center at IWF and a regular contributor here at IWN. For this weekly series, we talk with people who are advocating for new educational options, creating options, and people, mostly mothers, who come and share their school choice stories with us. We hope that you'll find these conversations encouraging and inspiring as you ponder educational options for your own family. Today, I am so pleased to be joined by Dawn Soifer. Dawn is the founder of Nevada Action for School Options, which is a nonprofit action tank supporting the timely growth of diverse choices of high quality, rich, and personalized educational opportunities for all Nevada learners. Nevada Action pursues this mission through advancing smart public policies and systems that work, working to support schools directly, and by fostering public understanding and stewardship within Nevada's many communities. Don, thank you so much for talking with me about what you're doing in Nevada and some other things that we're going to explore today.
Always a pleasure, Jenny. Great to talk.
All right, so that introduction was very Nevada-centric, but let's be clear, you were here in Virginia with me and probably here before me for many years, I think 25 years, and you even were part of the founding of an influential think tank here, Lexington. Tell us about your experience in Virginia, working in public policy in the nation's capital, and the role that you played in the school choice community.
Well, thanks. I've been a Nevadan for 5 years, and this wonderful state of great Americans has been very welcoming to me and to the work that I came here to do. I spent most of my adult life in and around Washington D.C. Doing all sorts of all sorts of things, and particularly focusing on building a think tank. And I was an education researcher, and my research really focused on sort of unintended consequences within systems, which leads to educational freedom and school choice in so many ways. And we did an awful lot of good, I think, in DC and creating the ecosystem that we have now, and in Virginia, where we made the state safe for charter schools and helped bring along parental options that Virginia is now well along its way and hopefully making good progress on. And I just got to a point in my life where I sort of thought and realized that you sort of know what education research has to tell us. You know, we know an awful lot about that, and let's go ahead and do it. And I love the great people that I was able to work alongside in DC and in the think tank world. And Nevada, particularly Southern Nevada, really feels to me and felt to me at the time more like what America's future is really going to look like. And I knew that I was going to be keeping good and busy as this sort of next generation action tank way of doing things. To meet those challenges and America's challenges, where the work that we did in DC and the DC Charter Board and the DC school choice sector has a ton going for it, and a ton of challenges that it's making more and more progress every year meeting. Nevada's got different challenges. Nevada, first of all, I think Southern Nevada looks a lot more like America's future is going to look. The challenges are America's challenges, the school funding challenges, the fifth largest school district of the country. And then sort of fast forward to the start of pandemic, where I became a statewide charter school authorizer here in Nevada. And I was in talking with the leadership of the city of North Las Vegas, the poorest, fastest growing, hardest working city in Nevada, about some more traditional stuff, how to locate charter schools that had career technical aspects to them. And it just became very clear that the fifth largest school district in the country that has neglected North Las Vegas for 25, 30 years wasn't going to be there for their residents, right? They just were going to shut down and just not be helpful during pandemic at all. So I had done good work with microschooling that I've been championing for a long time, and sort of was starting to worry if the charter school world was ever going to really be able to get its arms around microschooling to its fullest potential. And now we're seeing great microschools start to thrive, like Wildflower, or some of what 4.0 is doing. And I don't know if charter authorizers are always going to be able to keep pace. So my brilliant chief of staff and I worked through the night and dropped 2 briefing books on the city manager's desk in the morning, and ended up during pandemic, when the school district completely shut down in the most inequitable and least helpful of ways, created microschools in the city's rec centers and libraries that operated every day in person during the pandemic, funded by city dollars that were appropriated, having nothing at all to do with per pupil funding streams. In fact, it was free for residents, but they had to drop out of the school district and become legally homeschoolers and follow those rules. And Nevada has very good homeschool rules to do it. And we designed a program. The city wanted us to design a microschool around pandemic learning loss, right? And 3/4 of our kids were more than 2 grade levels behind. So that was what we did. I only sort of mention that here because microschools don't have to be about learning loss. They don't even have to be about academics. We've got now a fantastic constellation of 22 great microschools here in Las Vegas, led by some of the most incredible educators I've ever really had the chance to work with. I mean, there are some amazing DC educators that I miss very much, but these are educators on par with that caliber. And some of them care more about things like their children's social and emotional learning than they even do about academic learning and state content standards. So it's an incredibly diverse, rich sector. And as more and more parents are just millions of parents in America are just fundamentally reconsidering and reevaluating their relationships with the institutions that they've always relied upon to meet their schooling needs, microschooling is coming along at a great time, and I don't think it's ever going back.
Don, this is so exciting. You said so many things that were so encouraging, and that's what we need right now as we come out of the pandemic. And we do see catastrophic learning loss across the country as parents are feeling like, gosh, I can't get the school district to listen to me and my student is suffering. You're telling a totally different story. You're talking about creating something new and serving students and putting students and educators at the center of it. So let's break down a little bit of what you were talking about. What is a microschool?
So, we're used to having rules all through education, and we don't need them. Our organization, Nevada Action, that is increasingly doing microschooling building work around the country, it just needs to be a multifamily learning environment for us. Microschools can be organized as private schools, as homeschool co-ops, as in some cases, schools within public schools or charter schools. The organizational and the governance model doesn't matter to us. We see really two kinds of microschools. We see independent microschools. Some of them can be aligned with company providers. That's totally fine. That are sort of the updated version of the one-room schoolhouse we like to say we like the 1860s model of microschooling, when slate blackboards first started being transported across the American prairies on trains, and the multi-age classroom came in. So microschooling sounds like this new and sexy education term, but there's really nothing new about it, right? And I think what's new about it is that it's bringing in families that had never considered themselves candidates for school choice, really, schools of choice. Very, in places like Nevada that sort of has struggled to get the votes in place that it needs to pass school choice programs. The families that we see in our microschools totally mirror the population in every way, in ways that schools of choice had kind of gotten away from. And it brings in millions of entirely new families into microschooling, and whether it's the small learning environments that I just described. And the other aspect of it that really is taking off, I think, is what we did in North Las Vegas that I described was the country's first true public-private partnership for microschooling. So partnership microschooling can be with a local government that might just be feeling disenfranchised by its big county school district, like you have in Virginia. You can have employers who are working with some great contractors and other employers who are just looking for in a business climate where employers are fighting for the same population. It can be a real leg up, whether it's a small contractor or a big multi-state hotel casino, or we're doing a partnership microschool in rural Nevada with a public library system in a city that, frankly, we've been trying to get good charter schools in for years and years and have never quite got it done. But the public library board voted to do a microschool with us in their library, and it's going to be exciting. Sometimes small churches, that houses of worship that are maybe a little bit too small to do schools in other ways, professional associations, the law enforcement associations. So partnership microschooling really is getting a lot of attention as a way to take this thing. I've been doing education like you have for long enough that I don't know if I believe in scale in education. I just think that that's kind of a myth that the wonks like to throw around. But we can really take this to a whole new level, and it really wouldn't surprise me if we ended up capturing a market share that rivals the the charter school or the private school market share in this country in the microschooling, and it's entirely new families, and it's honestly just once you spend time in them, and we have national folks coming through our Vegas microschools every week. It's just exciting in a way that charter schools were in the beginning. There are still some exciting new charter schools, but when the DC charter school pioneers would meet in a church basement and really figure out a path forward that was better than the systems in place, this is that level of excitement, and this is that level of really world-class educators, and it's a lot of fun.
I love hearing that, Don, because there's a lot of weariness here in Virginia and DC, and that that might be one reason that you left. You knew that you needed to go be where there was vibrancy, and you needed to be part of creating that, which sounds like you very much are. So I'm hearing there's independent microschools, there are partnership microschools.
Yeah.
Tell us, you were talking about charter schools and you've referenced authorizing. Tell us a little bit about the governance on microschools. I'm honestly I'm not as up to speed on this policy as I should be. Do all the partnership? Do the microschools have to go through the charter authorizing process? It doesn't sound like it. There's an alternative.
There's different ways you can do it, and a lot of that depends on the legal framework in every state. Like we were in West Virginia all last week, which with the new Hope Scholarship Program presents a lot of real opportunities so that dollars can follow the kid. And there are states that the charter school authorizers have been flexible in their legal framework so that this can happen through a charter school mechanism. But for microschooling to really live up to its just transformative potential, you have the opportunity to really build microschools around the particular learners that you've got. And in this golden age of learning tools and digital content, you can do it on a fly. You can start one way, and if your kids are not responding to Singapore math and you want to switch out your math and do something completely different, if you want to not be in school 5 days a week, have a true hybrid model that can really bring in, whether you want your focus to be faith-based or civics or career and technical or nature and ecology, whatever it is that you want to do, you have a flexibility that, as a 13-year charter school authorizer on two of the most successful authorizing bodies in the country, right? It's really tough because charter authorizing isn't easy, but it's simple. You just enforce the law. You don't create the law. And charter school frameworks are so rigid. The charter sector has evolved in a way that it sort of looks to replicate success in almost a cookie cutter kind of way. Like this is a model that's working really well in the Pacific Northwest or Southern California. So I'd like one of those, please. Or microschool, you really have the potential to build it around your own particular learners and their families and their schedules. And in Vegas, people work hard. People work 3 shifts. So maybe having a schedule that aligns with the parents' schedule so they get to see their kids is the best way to do it. And you can really do it that way. So Nevada also has some of the most over-regulated private schools in the country. And our private school leaders are some of my favorite people. I built the private school association here when I first got here and love them very much. And they're amazing educators, but they're so regulated down to square feet per kid and hours per year and basically Common Core content and basically licensed teachers as requirements that it's just easier in many states to just organize as a homeschool co-op sort of approach. Again, depending on homeschool laws, because we think of homeschooling as something that's almost like a biblical freedom. But in fact, homeschoolers fought very hard to get the laws to be as good as they are now. And when you have situations that are new, right? The homeschoolers that have been making the world go round in this country for 350 years are good at what they do. And a lot of these are brand new families, right? It's bringing in whole new bases, people that are, people that know Democrat lawmakers in their own social circles, former Democrat lawmakers and city mayors themselves. When he worked in North Las Vegas, every single elected official was a Democrat. Just succeed, just do this well, and let it live up to its potential. And we're bringing in whole new communities under the school choice base, and it can look in lots of ways. And we're still sort of adopting it, and it looks a little bit differently everywhere. And that's great. That's part of what makes this exciting as sort of the early adoption phase of a whole new way of doing things.
All right. So I hear you saying that in West Virginia, where you have an education savings account, and West Virginia is one of the 10 states that does have education savings accounts, funding can follow the children and could follow the children to a microschool type option. So a West Virginia near universal ESA program is going to be conducive to microschool flourishing. But then you're also contrasting that with Nevada, which does not have that kind of option, and has different kinds of processes, and yet microschools are flourishing there. So that's encouraging, because it sounds like it doesn't have to be one path to developing and thriving for parents and entrepreneurs who are interested in this option. I hate to bring it back to funding, but a lot of education policy is driven by per pupil funding, and a lot of decisions are made around that, and a lot of battles are fought around funding. So tell me a little bit more about funding microschools.
So we've been through the school choice trenches plenty of times in plenty of places before. And you know that to get the votes that you need or to get the deal done, you've got to make deals politically sometimes that hamstring the effectiveness of the program and of the options that you're looking to put in place. Especially with microschooling, that it really is schooling and not just schools. Like when this is a microschool with homeschoolers, it's not just school at home. You have the opportunity to draw learning content from a range of different sources. And in many states, homeschooling gets a lot less exciting when kids get to high school, because homeschoolers feel obligated to go with one accredited program. And there's lots of good ones out there, right? But the minute you lock yourself into just participating in only one program and getting all of your content from only one source effectively, no matter how nimble that source might look up front, it makes it a lot less exciting than the potential, right? We're training kids for their future, not the future that we had when we were their age. And in this economy and the directions that it's going, it's crucial now to be able to draw their learning. The good people who are taking a learn everywhere approach are absolutely right in lots of ways. You should be able to get your meaningful content for learning from lots of different places. So when you're talking about government programs, and certainly the states that have education savings accounts have a lot going for them, and states that have been creative in finding public dollars that can go to support microschooling. And there's lots of different ways to get this done. And as we work in more and more states, we're finding creative ways to bring more dollars into education, which is crucial, right? Because we're about to hit those of us that do education in state legislatures are realizing what's about to hit us from a fiscal point of view. And it might just be that the monopolists that have been able to fight for preserving a public school monopoly in their state legislatures, whether or not that monopoly includes charter schools, might not be able to afford to do it anymore, right? Because because the cost of doing it is so great that maybe they can't, for states that are trying to regulate homeschoolers, which, to you and me might sound like a biblical right, but it sure doesn't to the monopolists. And then when they start trying to add requirements to just plain homeschooling your own child in your own home, which is something we see every year in different states, mm-hmm. the more you accept public dollars, the more easy it is for those monopolists to put strings to attach to those public school dollars. And well, there's some really forward-thinking leaders in places like West Virginia and New Hampshire that are finding some interesting ways to do it. You're still defining an opportunity to regulate. And I think right now in this, just not even just education, but just in terms of economics, right? These early adopters of microschooling really want to defy any sort of those sorts of government regulations. So when they're able to find ways to make it happen in non-school choice states, that just tells you these are families. This is not going back in the toothpaste tube. This is going to be here for a long time, and probably going to be a part of our broader education ecosystem in this country moving forward. I think maybe in different ways. It might look differently, and I'm sure it will. But it's a new way of doing things.
Well, I was thinking while you were talking about all those regulations that the monopolists try to impose, as if they've ever proven themselves to be worthwhile endeavors. If you think about I can't believe that the private schools in Nevada are so heavily regulated and down to the curriculum. I mean, you look at the literacy instruction in this country and what has been pushed out through the public schools, and we're just now getting to the point where people are realizing, oh wait, no, that was the wrong way to teach literacy. We meant that you were supposed to do phonics and teach the kids basic sounds. We've been doing it the wrong way. Like those are the kind of like edicts from on high that come come down, the wrong way to do things. But in a microschool environment, uh, an educator, the parents involved would be able to immediately see, oh, these kids aren't learning how to read. We need to immediately pivot and go a different way. There wouldn't be 20 years of kids being taught, intentionally taught the wrong way, and therefore having lousy reading. So the idea that they can uh, know what's going on and then immediately make a change and have the flexibility to do so is really exciting. I'm glad that those kids and those families and those educators have that opportunity. How are people finding out about micro schools? Are they coming to you? Are you going to them? How do
Yeah.
they learn more?
So given this early adopters phase, right, where systemic regulatory harassment is real. Like remember the early days of Arizona charter schools when John Keegan and friends were, having, sometimes it's the lowest level of government, local government regulator. Sometimes it's more systemic than that. Sometimes when, what we did in North Las Vegas, we had the state attorney general sending nasty cease and desist letters. Where these are early adopters, sometimes the monopolists are just playing the regulators that get out of bed in the wrong side of the morning, are really looking to make trouble in so many jurisdictions. And where they're not, be careful, because that might be where it comes back strongest. You'll never see us publish a list of our microschools or a website with all of them listed now, no matter how many people ask us, and lots of people have. Even the Vela Education Fund, which is doing amazing work building and seeding microschooling around the country, won't put out a public list because the systemic harassment is real. So Microschooling NV and Microschooling WV is a great place we hear from people. One way we like to start is with a survey. You'll see it right there, a homeschooling, microschooling parent survey. It just gets a sense of where you live, what you're after, and then our team will follow up and help you connect and maybe help you build, right? Because this is a movement that's about builders as much as it is about joiners right now. And we've seen some pretty great things come out of that.
All right, so I've got this website, which is nevadaaction.org. From there, they can get to the Microschooling NV.
Or microschoolingnv.org.
Okay, we can put a link to that in the write-up for this video. Don, there's so much more to talk about. This is a whole new world that you're creating out there. I know you're not somebody who wastes time on Twitter, but just wanted people to make sure that they had that information there in case you do post information about microschooling. What would you say to a parent who's saying, you know what, this isn't working, what's going on here? And my neighbor had a good experience with their pandemic pod, and I'm hearing Don talk about micro schools. What would you say to help them get over the hurdle of inertia of like, nah, it sounds like too much? Like, how do you get them to take action if the seeds are planted here?
You really can do this. It's intimidating at first. It was intimidating when we started homeschooling, right? And you're worried, as my kid is, you start digging up the great E.D. Hirsch books about what my fifth grader needs to know. And those have value, right? And this is the golden age of digital content. There's so many sources out there. Doing it, combining forces, and whether it was the early days of, I remember working with this amazing Afrocentric homeschool co-op outside of Richmond. That was a response to the conditions in the public schools there at the time. But pairing up and doing microschooling, and whether or not you're able to do it in a way that you're dividing up responsibilities, or able to hire in and bring in an educator. It doesn't need to be a licensed educator by any means. And we've had some of our most amazing results as of people around the country with people from very non-traditional education approaches, which is no surprise to you, right? That's our star middle school microschooling teacher was the guy that runs the pyrotechnic show at the Knights of the Round Table at the Excalibur. Right? And what middle school kid wouldn't want to learn math from a guy that uses it to blow things up every day?
That's awesome.
And you can really do this. And in some ways, it's almost like a management exercise, right? But this is an area that it's going to be, I don't know if it's the future of American education, but the American education world is going to have to step aside and make room for microschooling, because it's bringing in whole new families in ways that once they've seen what they can do here, they never want to go back. Like lots of things, it can be messy at first, and just weather it. And first year results have been through the roof. Our first year results were more than 2 years of academic gains in reading and math. In reading, and a little bit less than that, but the same ballpark for math. You can really expect those things, and you don't need to waste all the time that your kid spends in their school day every year to do it. If your kid can stay on task, you've got a lot of time and freedom. And you as a parent have to get on with your own life, right? And do the things that being a grown-up and paying the bills entails. But this is an exciting, wild frontier, and we hear from people doing all sorts of new things. The growth of the American Forest School movement is one of the coolest things I've seen in a long time. Mm-hmm. And if you're ever outside of Atlanta, one of my favorites is right there. Like, but there's just great stuff, and this is a community that is sharing and working together and looking out for each other the way that we haven't seen in even schools of choice communities that are some of the most nurturing and kindest hearted of any you'll see in education. And it's pretty cool. I'd love to hear from folks, and wherever you are, we're working in more and more states every week, every month, and we'd love to hear from people. So drop us a note, drop us our contact information is at the website, and we'd love to hear from your good people and help you share and help you build.
Don, thank you so much for this incredibly encouraging conversation. I think here at IWN, we're going to have to dig deeper and learn more about microschools, follow your work closely. And I'm thinking maybe at IWF at some point we'll need to craft a policy focus that talks about this development and shines the light on it. Not too brightly, because we don't want to let the monopolists and the regulators, but just enough to encourage entrepreneurs and educators and parents to know that this is possible. So thank you.
You guys do great work, and we'd love to do it with you.
Thanks, Don. All right. Well, thank you to IWN viewers for watching this video. We hope that you found it encouraging and interesting. And we hope that you'll join us here every Tuesday for our weekly Escaping Your Government Assigned Schools videos. And we definitely want to hear from you in the comments. So please do comment and share your thoughts.